Alright guys, with Will Rossler here, and today I'm going to be reviewing Game of Thrones Season 8, Episode 5, The Bells. Now, it seems to me at this point in the series, with only, 2 episodes left, including this one, that this series of Game of Thrones Season 8 has been by far the most divisive of any series to date. And it was really, to me, I was someone who had watched the other episodes in this season and had seen the problems people had with them, and had been like, yeah, I understand where you're coming from, but you've got to look at it from this and this. And this episode was the one that broke the camel's back. Game of Thrones Season 8, Episode 5, The Bells, was, at points, shambolic in its presentation, of characters, in its conclusion of story arcs. It was silly and stupid, but on the other hand, there were parts of this episode that were poetic and were disgusting and vile, and those parts were excellent. And it's very weird looking at an episode like this, because I'm so conflicted, because most of the big character moments I disliked, but most of the pure kind of just scenery, environmental storytelling moments were great. And as I go through my chronological review of this episode, keep that in mind, that I'm not on either side of the spectrum hating or disliking this episode, as some people are. This series has been, as I said, the most divisive of any of the seasons of Game of Thrones. And you can tell it's not written by George R. R. Martin anymore. And it definitely showed to me in this episode. And it's one of those things where next week is the finale of a 10-year long series, and I just kind of hope that they give it the justice that the series deserves. At the end of the day, my life's not going to be ruined if Game of Thrones doesn't end out I want it to, but there's a right way to do it and there's a wrong way to do it, and I guess with the end of this episode in mind, shall see what they do next week. But anyway, so the episode kicked off, and the beginning was essentially the death of Varys. Now, Varys is actually one of my favourite characters in the show, so I was quite saddened to see him die. Varys confronts Jon as he gets to the island, and he basically says, like, you're a better king, like, you're the rightful king. Jon's like, I don't want it. And basically, Tyrion goes and snitches to Daenerys Targaryen. He goes and tells her that Varys is essentially a traitor, and they take Varys and they execute him. Dracarys, boom, burnt. Varys is dead, and that was sad because you got a little moment between Varys and Tyrion before he said goodbye, old friend. That was cool because, as I said, since season 5, those two have been together. They were in Braavos together. They took out all the Harpy people in was it Braavos, I believe, or Meereen as well. And Varys is one of those characters that he's always been politically inclined, but never completely into anything. He sometimes just lets things go with the flow. And it was this episode here where he finally said, no, she can't be the king, she can't be the ruler, there's got to be a better way, and in the end it cost him his life. And Tyrion, most people are going to hate Tyrion, and Tyrion snitching on Varys, very much, and I think this is the beginning of what I'm talking about with characters doing things they wouldn't do. Tyrion telling Daenerys that Varys is plotting against her. Like, that's not something Tyrion Lannister would do. And we know that's not something Tyrion Lannister would do, because he's a noble man. At the end of the episode, we'll get to that in a little bit, but at the end of the episode, he, regardless of how much he hates his sister, he hates his brother for leaving, regardless of all that, he still tries to save them at the end of the episode. And we'll get to that in a little while. But death of Varys, sad moment, completely silly when you think about Tyrion's motives, but regardless, sad moment. Then we had the armies at the gates of King's Landing, and they waited, and they waited, and they waited, and then the dragon burst through the front gate and killed all the Lannister men. And that was the rest of this episode, or the majority of this 1 hour, 20 minute, 80-minute episode. It was Daenerys' forces, the Unsullied, the Dothraki, Jon Snow and his men, and Sir Davos and Grey Worm, and there was a really good camera angle I'll get to in a minute. And it was all of these people just walking through King's Landing, taking out all the Lannister army. And it was eerily reminiscent of the third episode of the Star Wars original trilogy. No, sorry, the prequel trilogy with Revenge of the Sith, with Anakin walking through the Jedi Temple with all the clone troopers. It's eerily similar to that. You got Grey Worm walking in the middle. You got Davos and you got Jon Snow, and just hacking people down left and right. And it was just, you felt like this was going to happen, but you didn't think it'd be a slaughter. You didn't think it'd be this one-sided. You think all the men that they'd lost, honestly, it would be a more even fight. But the Golden Company, the Lannister army, were nothing on the armies of Daenerys Targaryen. Euron and his fleet, the Iron Fleet, were destroyed by Drogon. Just absolutely destroyed them all. Blew up Euron's ship. He does survive. He comes back into it a little bit later. So yeah, they just walk through the city, killing everyone, and eventually the bells ring to cease fire, to say we surrender, and Daenerys is standing on Drogon in the middle of the city, and there's also Arya and Sandor Clegane are in the city, and Jaime's in the city, and basically Daenerys looks at Cersei, and she looks at the city, and she just starts burning civilian people. And that was really the moment in this episode where I just kind of stopped thinking. Because I really do love Game of Thrones, and it's a great series, it's fantastic television. But when you have a character like Daenerys Targaryen, and yes, they have hinted that she has more violent and malicious tendencies, but nothing on what she did in this episode. She rides Drogon through all the streets of King's Landing and just burns innocent civilians after innocent civilians after innocent civilians. And with that, Grey Worm and the Dothraki and the Unsullied, they just go and kill loads of unarmed Lannister men who all drop their swords. Grey Worm just goes and attacks them for no reason. And I'm like, so Grey Worm's not a very likeable character anymore. And I understand, again, he lost Missandei, he wants revenge, but there are ways you go about this in storytelling. You don't turn that sort of character, who everybody really likes, into such a villain. And that's the same thing they did with Daenerys. With her destroying, it almost felt like her killing all these innocent civilians gave Grey Worm, gave all the generals, gave all the Dothraki, all the Unsullied, the wherewithal to go and do it as well. And it almost puts Daenerys is the main villain now. Daenerys is the main villain of Game of Thrones. I knew they were going to do it. I thought it was really lazy how they did it. They could have done this in so many other ways. But they just went with the most boring, mundane, obvious approach. And that was the bulk of this episode. It was just people hiding from Daenerys, and Daenerys just burning people. And this episode looked pretty. It looked very pretty. And as far as, like, brutal battles, and I know I've talked about the Battle of Winterfell being brutal and the Battle of the Bastards being brutal. This battle was brutal because there were innocents dying. And there's just innocents getting stabbed left, right and centre. There's guards dragging women off. One guard drags a woman off, and then Jon Snow runs after him and stabs him, and then he tells her to run away. Because Jon Snow's watching all this happen, and he's like, no, stay back, no, we're not getting involved. Like, I'm not getting involved in this, this is not fair. But no, Daenerys' men just kill every single person they see. They do not care what it is, man, woman, child, guard, innocent. and as Daenerys and Drogon are destroying the city of King's Landing, Jaime makes his way up to the keep, but around the back bit where they escaped with Tyrion all the way back before season 5. And before he goes up the keep, he meets Euron. He has a little fight with Euron. Euron stabs him, but then Jaime stabs Euron. Jaime kills Euron, so Euron's died. So that's Varys dead and Euron now. So Jaime fights up to the Red Keep. Who goes after Cersei? Cersei's waiting at the top of the Red Keep, just like, we can wait, we can hold out. Qyburn's like we've lost Cersei, we need to go. And so Cersei and Qyburn and the Mountain are walking down the stairs, and at the bottom of the stairs there's Arya and the Hound. The Hound says, Arya, you don't need to be here, the bitch is going to die anyway. But Arya's like, no, I need to do it. And the Hound's like, no, you don't need to be here. She's going to die. What's the point in risking your life to kill her? Arya says, thank you, which I thought was some of the best resolution to a story arc in the whole season. That was great. Arya, in all honesty, probably shouldn't kill Cersei, because heroes don't usually hold vendettas. And at the end of the day, Arya doesn't kill Cersei because that's not who she is. She's retained a little bit of her innocence, and that's fantastic, and I thought that was a really good way to conclude her story. She walks off, the Hound walks up the stairs towards the Mountain, the Hound kills all of the bodyguards around Cersei, the Hound and the Mountain square off, Qyburn tries to get in the way, the Mountain kills Qyburn, Cersei runs off, and the Hound and the Mountain have their fight. It was cut in between clips of Arya trying to get through the streets and avoiding the dragon and stuff, which was really fantastic because it showed the desperation of the Hound in fighting his brother and the desperation in Arya in just trying to survive, which was amazing. The fight between the Mountain and the Hound was brutal and vicious and exactly what I thought it would be. At points, I actually didn't know which one would win. When the Hound knocked the Mountain's head off, I'd totally forgotten why the Mountain's face is like it is, because when you originally see the Mountain, he's all bearded and stuff like that. I can't remember why the Mountain is as he is. But no, they have this really drag-out fight. The Hound impales him with a sword, but the Mountain just laughs it off, basically, and pulls it out, and he destroys the Hound, and he picks him up, and he goes to squish his face like he did to Oberyn Martell. But as he's doing that, the Hound stabs him in the face with a dagger. The Mountain pulls that out of his face and walks that off. So the Hound says, literally, there's nothing more I can do. He spears him off the side of the tower. Both men tumble into the flames. Both men are dead. The Hound and the Mountain kill each other. And again, that is a really fitting way to end that story arc. Because at the end of the day, the Hound was never going to beat the Mountain in combat unless he took himself out. So that's good storytelling, and those two stories, Arya and the Hound, those two stories were ended really well. Jaime meets Cersei at the bottom of the Red Keep, and he tries to take her out of the Red Keep. He takes her under the crypts to try and escape, but it's been blocked off by rocks, and basically they can't escape now. And so Jaime and Cersei share one final moment where they basically they embrace. And then the keep crumbles on top of them. They're crushed. Jaime Lannister and Cersei are dead. Right, okay. So Jaime Lannister is one of my favourite characters in Game of Thrones. And I should have felt something for his death. But I didn't. Because everything Jaime did in this episode went against his whole character arc for 6 seasons, 7, 8 seasons. His character arc has been about him separating himself from Cersei. Yes, he was back for season 6 or season 7, but that was for a tiny bit. His whole character arc was about him getting away from Cersei, being his own man. And in the end, he just went back to her, and I thought that was completely against that character's ideals. I thought he was going to go back and kill her. But no, he just goes back. I thought he'd settled down with Brienne. I thought that was the plot point that we're going with. Nope, Jaime's dead. Cersei's dead, and I mean Cersei's death just kind of felt like it was out of nowhere. Like I thought she was going to be killed by someone, not just by a boulder. Like just really look, it was nice, and of all the ways she could have died, dying in Jaime's arms is a good way to do it. But I would have liked her dying in Jaime's arms with Jaime delivering the blow or something like that. Just these actions of Jaime, as I said, were against his character. That's not what he'd done for so long. And that was another key part of this episode. Tyrion's stupidity in giving up Varys. Tyrion's stupidity in continuously accepting Daenerys as the queen, saying she's fine, you've got to live with it, we've got to live with it. It doesn't matter how ruthless she is and all this stuff. When Varys is like, she's crazy. Like, she's going to be another Mad King. Tyrion's an idiot. Daenerys her actions were completely against her character, and Jaime's were completely the same. And Cersei and Jaime are crushed, and then you have Arya, who's crawling out of rubble, and she gets on a horse, and she rides out of King's Landing. And that is the end of the episode. And in all honesty, like, that's it. That is the 80-minute episode. It felt to me like this episode was trying to put too much in. Yes, there was this big bit in the middle where they had all these just people getting slaughtered, and that's a great backdrop for drama, but they had too many other things going on. The Jaime Cersei thing needed more episodes for it to be truly felt like it was important, or for it to come to fruition properly. Because this, I thought, was really half-assed and really cheap way to do it. Daenerys' turn to the dark side. It was like Execute Order 66. It was so lazy, so mundane, and the show is in a real identity crisis now. The one thing that separated Game of Thrones from many other series was its unpredictability. And as many people have said this, it seems to have lost that now. And there's only 1 week left. I don't know what they're doing next week. They killed off a lot of characters in this episode. If you think about it, they killed off Varys, they killed off Yoren, they killed off Cersei and Jaime, they killed off the Mountain, they killed off the Hound, they killed off Qyburn, they killed off probably someone else somewhere. But that's 7 major characters this week. So, you know, like, yeah, that's cool that they killed off characters, but none of them felt really warranted. Qyburn's was pointless. Cersei and Jaime's would have been more special if there'd been more time devoted to their reconnection. Because remember, Cersei's been the villain throughout the series that nobody wants to see be happy. But when she was there saying, my baby boy, and all that sort of stuff, I'm just like, this should be better than it is. And the acting from Lena Headey is top-notch. The acting from the guy who plays Jaime Lannister, I apologise, is top-notch. But it's just the way that the people wrote it was not how it was presented. It's so weird how they did that. The Daenerys stuff. Daenerys, I honestly feel like Emilia Clarke at points in this season has filed it in. Like, she had very little dialogue in this episode. She had very few spoken words. From the first barge through the gate at the beginning of King's Landing of the battle, she had maybe 1 line of dialogue. Cersei Lannister's barely had any lines of dialogue this season. And they're some of the best characters on the show. But it's just a weird episode. And when I was watching it, like, with my because it's impressive, it's a really good looking episode, as I said. Like, as far as the technical splendor, the actual brutality of the battles, it makes you feel uncomfortable, which is how you should feel, which is fantastic. And damn, it's just a shame that the fantastic environmental backdrop, which they had for a Daenerys heel turn, they could have done this if they had 10 episodes in an episode's time. You know, if they had more episodes, they could have done this. They could have mainly done the Daenerys heel turn better. But because of the time, they had to rush it, and it just feels lazy and tacky and just boring. Really boring. Everything, like, outside of those character moments with the Hound and the Mountain, which I thought was an excellent moment, with Arya and the Hound. Arya in this episode was fantastic. Macy Williams deserves tremendous credit in this episode for some of her line delivery because it was really good. I'm just feeling the finale of Game of Thrones is next week, and everyone should be excited, and I don't know if anyone is. Everyone's just like, I hope it's good. When we shouldn't be like that. This is Game of Thrones. When I watch Game of Thrones, I don't usually say, oh, it's going to be good. It's not. I wonder if it's going to be good. I'm going to go, it's going to be great this week. But at the minute, I look at Game of Thrones and I say we're in a bit of an identity crisis. I'm not going to give this week's episode a bad grade, but it's going to get a pretty harsh one. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. I'm going to give it a slightly above average on Angry Joe's scale. It'll be interesting to see Angry Joe's review, actually, later on today. I haven't seen his yet. I've seen Jeremy John's. Mine goes up a little bit later, unfortunately, because I've had uni today. But, yeah, just 6 out of 10. I thought that there was some stuff that was great. Arya Hound stuff was great. The Hound Mountain stuff was great. The brutality of the battle, the poor innocent people getting slaughtered, it was brutal. It was great. But the stupid plot of this episode, the stupidity of Tyrion, the fact that characters don't do what they should be doing, really, by how we know them. Cersei and Jaime's farewell just feels an afterthought, in all honesty, and it just feels, it loses all of its gravitas, considering that Jaime has just gone against his word again. Just a wacky episode of Game of Thrones. That's why it's getting a 6 out of 10. By far the worst episode of this season. Look, the first 2 episodes were slow. They were slow, absolutely. But this episode was not as good as those. This had more action, absolutely, and they need this at this point, but don't know. I preferred last week's, definitely preferred the Battle of Winterfell, and of the 3 episodes I've reviewed on my channel, this was by far the worst. Thanks for watching, guys. This has been Rob Russell. Like, comment, subscribe for more. Tell me what your thoughts. What did you think to this week's episode of Game of Thrones, Season 8, Episode 5, The Bells? Did you think I'm too harsh on it? Do you think I've been too lenient on it? Which character death in this episode affected you the most? For me, probably the Mountain and the Hound. I thought that was, I said, the best moment of the episode, really. Clegane Bowl was really great. They've built it up for 3, 4, 5 seasons, so I'm going to be doing, hopefully, a birthday pickups video soon. Obviously, my birthday was last Tuesday. Happy birthday to me. I'm now 21. I'm going to be showing you some things for my birthday, which you can maybe see around the room already. But anyway, guys, thanks for watching. This has been Revolver Russell.